Hello, 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 and welcome back to DLA Alternative. It's your boy Brandon, and I hope everyone is doing phenomenal as always. And thank you to everyone who keeps subscribing, liking, and following this journey. We are on the road to 1K, people, so keep helping us get there. We are almost at that 900 mark, so let's get there, people. But yes, as you can tell by the thumbnail and title, we are finally getting into it with the Jim Hopper theory. And in this one, I want to talk about a conversation I've had questions about since season 1. And yes, season 1, people. So let's jump to chapter 8, season 1, the Upside Down, and the very intro scene before the intro credits involving Joyce and Hopper and the people at Hawkins' lab. But in this conversation, there's so many questions as to what happens and why it happens the way it does during this scene. So basically, if you watch some of my other theories, you would know that we have been on the hunt to figuring out who T. Bridges is with the alias investigation theories, the Hawkins Post theories, and now the tea leaf reading theory. But more importantly, in those theories, we have a big connection to one of our characters being Jim Hopper, involving him with the whole time involvement with this show, involving him with the whole memory involvement with this show, and involving him with all of those mysterious articles that he's the one that researches in season 1. So basically, during this scene, it kicks off with Joyce, and she ends up meeting Brenner for the first time. But during that conversation, okay, he tries to say, okay, there's sons that are being taken, there's daughters that are going to be taken, and basically he says that he needs her help and he needs her to trust him. And basically Joyce just does what any mother would do in this situation. She tells him to fuck off. And she calls him out on his bullshit, but all she calls him out on is Will's involvement, okay? So keep that in mind, that when we jump to Hopper's conversation right now, that all Joyce and Brenner talked about was Will's involvement. So let's jump right into this one. It kicks off right after Joyce and Brenner are talking, okay? And we see Hopper getting tortured with the taser by these people who are also involved with Hawkins' lab. One of these people specifically being that lady named Connie, who has this involvement with Hawkins' lab in season 1 that we do not understand, in my opinion. And then this other dude that's just right on her ass the whole time. He's always following her, okay? And he's like literally directly next to her in this scene. But then the guy that's tasing him, okay, is the guy that we see throughout season 1. The guy that we first see meet Brenner at Hawkins' lab. That's the guy who also shows them the security footage, okay, when Hopper and the other cops go there, all right? And then he's also there when Hopper sneaks in on his own, okay, to investigate, and he ends up getting caught and shit. And that's the guy he ends up knocking clean the fuck out, and then he puts a gun to the other guy's face and says, give me your gun and give me your badge, and I'm going to research this shit. So that guy, no doubt in my mind, has a lot of involvement being within the building of Hawkins' lab. So that's very important. But this lady, no doubt in my mind, has a lot of involvement with Brenner specifically, because she's there a lot of the time when Brenner is out of Hawkins' lab trying to find 11. So long story short, my point is that this is happening for a reason, why they are being interrogated, or at least tortured and interrogated. But the more important thing about both of these things, all right, and both of these scenes, is that they are being interrogated separately for a reason. And one's being interrogated like the mother of the child that is missing. He's not torturing her, okay? We don't see Brenner torturing Joyce. But when it comes to these people, all right, we see them torturing Hopper, and they're trying to get him to talk about what he knows, and he basically just keeps telling them everything. He even says to them, did I stutter? I told you, I know everything you guys have been doing. So basically, they don't give a shit what he's saying, and they keep tasing him, trying to get him to talk. But we know our boy Hopper, and our boy Hopper's a badass, and he is not going to talk. He knows there's something else going on, but the point is, in this conversation, he knows more than we actually know he knows. And that might sound confusing, but a lot of people think this, and this scene is what proves that, in my opinion. Because if you think about it, we see Brenner and Joyce first, okay, and we see them talking. So Joyce is talking to the bigger man in this picture, all right, being involved with Hawkins' lab, being Brenner. She's talking to Brenner first, so keep that in mind. And then Hopper is being interrogated by these other people who we know should not be as high in Hawkins' lab as Brenner. So basically, Hopper's getting interrogated by the second half, or the least important people at this point in time. So that's very important in my opinion, and keep that in mind. But what Hopper does here and how he handles this conversation is what changes that. And that's what proves that the fact that Joyce is talking to Brenner first, that there is a specific reason. And in my opinion, it's because those people at Hawkins' lab are trying to figure out which one of these two, being Joyce or Hopper, knows everything. And I mean that as in knows more than they know at this point in time, which sounds very confusing. But with, like I said, let's talk about what Hopper talks about, okay, and how he handles this conversation, because this proves that Hopper knows more than even the people at Hawkins' lab, in my opinion. But like I said, when it kicks off, we see Hopper getting zapped and tortured by that taser, okay? And they're trying to get him to talk. But basically, he gets to a point and he starts talking, okay? And he starts telling them, well, I know you guys do experiments on little kids, all right? And that you turn their parents' brains into mush. So basically what he's talking about right there, he's talking about Mama's involvement, being Terry Ives. And the way that these people look at him, they look at him like, oh shit, he actually does know more than we actually thought he knew. But that's not the point I'm trying to make, because obviously these people should know about Terry Ives, right? But then this is what gets interesting, okay? He goes, I also know that you guys killed Benny Hammond, you guys also faked Will Byers' death, and then you guys also made it seem like that girl ran away. So this is the difference right here, like I said, is that Joyce and Brenner, they're talking strictly about Will's involvement, not anybody else. But when we see Hopper get questioned, he starts talking about a lot of different things and a lot more than just Will's involvement, which is what this season is about, technically. He starts talking about stuff in the past and that's happening in the now, and then he's also talking about stuff that he should not know about, that they already tried to cover up, that they don't know how he would know this shit. So that's the difference right here, is that they're getting more out of Hopper, okay? They're getting way more out of Hopper, and now they know this. Because then all of a sudden, these people say, well, who are you working with? And that's the tell right there, people, even to Hopper, is that he knows that he got into their heads, because they go from what do you know to who are you working with? So that's proof right there that they know Hopper knows more than he should, but they want to know now who he's working with, because that makes a lot of sense, that if he's working with someone who knows this shit, then those are the answers they're trying to get here, people, the shit that they do not know and they're trying to figure out and how to stop. Because that's when it gets very interesting, people, because he says, I'm not working with anybody. I told you that. And that's when they've had enough. And that's when they pull him up and they get him up, because basically he says, oh yeah, I'm not working with anybody, but I did send this over to my boy at the Times who's going to blow this shit out of the water. And that's what makes them snap. So they pull his ass up and they put him into that chair. And then all of a sudden, that guy we've seen throughout this season, okay, working at Hawkins more than anything, he pulls out that vial and a syringe and he basically starts telling Hopper who he is and what he's going to be. And basically, he's trying to get into Hopper's head and he's like, you fucked up, and what we're going to do is we're going to make you this cop that has a drug problem and you had a bad week. And he basically says that that's what they're going to make him look like to the people and the public, okay? But right when that happens and right before that happens, that lady walks over for one last thing and she tells him, you made a mistake. And that's when Hopper changes his whole demeanor, okay? And this is the tell that Hopper does know more than these fucking people, okay? He basically tells them what's going to happen and that he's in charge now with how he handles this. Because basically Hopper looks at this woman, he goes, no, I didn't. And here's what's going to happen. So right now, Hopper took full control of this conversation and these people don't understand what he's about to say. And basically, he says exactly what ends up happening, okay? He says, you're going to let me and Joyce go. You guys are going to give us whatever we need, and we are going to go and find her son. And she looks at him, and she goes, oh, is that right? And he gives her this look, and he goes, yeah, that's right. And then all of a sudden, we get another scene, and it jumps to other people and shit. And then when we jump back to Hawkins' lab, we see that Hopper is now about to be in a room and talk to Brenner. So this is what I meant, that this interrogation and the way these interrogations happened were done for a reason. There's totally a reason why we see Joyce and Brenner talk first, and there's a reason why at Hawkins' lab these people are having Brenner talk to Joyce first. And in my opinion, that's because Brenner wants to figure out if Joyce is the one that knows more or is Hopper the one that knows more. And in my opinion right now, at this point in time, Brenner is the one that thinks Joyce is the one that knows more than this, and Joyce does not. And we as viewers, we know that Joyce just has this feeling about shit, but she really doesn't know why or how these things are happening. And we know this. But the thing about Hopper is that at different points in time during this season, say with the shed scene, when he sees something in the shed and then he doesn't say shit, that's odd to me. Say when we jump all the way to season 3, when Hopper's supposed to die, Hopper knows that he's not going to die some way because he jumps off of that shit. And we don't see that until season 4. And then there's another another scene that we're going to talk about in part 2 of this theory, and that's when he's talking to Dmitry, or whatever his name is, in the jail in Russia, okay, in Kamchatka. This is after they get caught, and then when Hopper thinks that all hell has gone bad and that nothing is going to change this and that they are screwed. And Hopper starts talking to Dmitry about some shit that we need to talk about in part 2 of this theory. So let me know your thoughts about that conversation before that. But my main point is that this is proof to me that there was a reason that Brenner needed to talk to Joyce first. And by how Joyce answered, he got his answers, okay? He got his answers that Joyce does not know anything more than what Will's involvement is, and that she thinks that they're involved with Will's vanishing, okay? But in my opinion, Brenner and the people at Hawkins Lab are also trying to figure out why Will vanished, because there's other shit going on involving Hawkins Lab that Will just got pulled into. So if you really think about this logically, they're trying to figure out something involving time and who knows what. And with how Hopper handles that conversation, he obviously told them something, people, that we were not allowed to see yet, that must have changed their mind and must have shown them enough to where they did not put drugs into his system, did not make him look like the junkie cop that had a bad week, and it was enough to get him out of that room and get him into a room with Brenner. And as we see Brenner enter that room, okay, Brenner's all nice to him. He gets a pack of cigarettes, he gives Jim Hopper a fucking cigarette and lets him smoke in there, and he's trying to be calm with him, okay, because he must know that Jim Hopper knows more, and he must know that Jim Hopper knows the stuff that they need to know. So he has to be nice to him at this point in time, and he has to give him what he wants. So in my opinion, this conversation gets interesting because he starts it off and he goes, "Where's the girl?" But once again, we see Hopper control the situation. He's not going to give him answers unless he gets what he wants. And there's a reason for that. We don't know why Hopper knows all of this, and we don't know why Hopper wants all of this, and we don't know why Hopper is so confident that this is going to happen. So basically, this is what gets interesting, because we know Hawkins Lab as the people that they need to cover all of this shit up and that they don't want the public knowing, okay, right? That's how we know Hawkins Lab to be in this show, is that they cover shit up and that they know how to cover shit up, all right? But how Hopper talks about this is Hopper's the one saying that he doesn't want anybody knowing in this. So if we think about it, Hopper starts off and he goes, "I want you to give me your word that nobody is going to know about this, and that the 3 boys, the other boys involved with this, will not be harmed and you will leave them alone." But the thing about that is he says the other 3 boys. He does not involve Will in that conversation, people. So that's very interesting if you think about it. Him basically saying you're going to leave those 3 boys alone. He doesn't want those 3 boys involved. And we know this from early on in episode 1 of this season, is that he wants them to go home and he wants them to not be involved with this at all. And we know that as the cop that doesn't want these kids involved, right? But what if there is something bigger than that, and that's why he does not want them involved? Because if Hopper knows more than we actually know he knows, then no doubt in my mind, there's a reason he needs these boys out of the situation that they keep putting themselves into, okay? Because their friend is the one that's at harm. They want to help because their friend is the one that is missing. And then in season 2, they want to help because their friend's the one being infected by the Mind Flayer. And then in season 3, they want to help because their town is being infected and 11 is in danger and their friend's brother is being infected, right? And then in season 4, we see half of our group in a different place in a completely different state, also trying to help and involve themselves in shit that's back in Hawkins. And we see what ends up happening at the end of season 4. We see Max get saved, but we also see that they involved themselves in something they were not a part of, okay? So in my opinion, did that screw things up at the end of season 4, or did that actually help the process? We do not know that, and we will know that in season 5, in my opinion. But with how Hopper acts throughout this whole scene and throughout everything involving this conversation, he's the one telling them what the fuck's going to happen. At this point in time, he has the upper hand, and those other people listened to him. They got him out of that room. They did not drug him up, and they put him into that room with Brenner to speak. And the reason being is that Brenner needed to make the final say that Jim Hopper actually does know something they don't know. And now that they know this, because Brenner can confirm this probably within this conversation, now that they know this, they need Jim Hopper's help, people. And the only reason they would need Jim Hopper's help is because he knows something that they don't, right? But basically that conversation ends with a lot of questions as well as to why Hopper just gives 11 up. And he basically says, if you agree to all of that and you give me your word, I'll tell you where your little science experiment is. But the thing about that also is that we don't know at the very end of season 1 how Jim Hopper knows she's in the forest and all that. We don't know why he's the one that ends up being her protector. We don't know anything about that. All we know is that Hopper is keeping 11 safe in season 2 and that Hawkins' lab does not know where 11 is. So that raises another question as to how Hopper knows that 11 was in the forest, right? If Hawkins' lab in season 2 did not know that, how does Jim Hopper know that in season 2? Because until Owen sees that 11 is with Jim Hopper, Hawkins' lab did not know where 11 was. Jim Hopper was keeping 11 safe and hidden, so how did he know she was going to be in the forest unless he knew himself and Hawkins' lab did not know? This conversation has so many questions, but what happens right after that, okay, is when Jim and Joyce talk walking down the hall before all of this shit goes down. Basically, those guards let Jim into that room where Joyce is being interrogated and she's sitting by herself, okay? And all of a sudden, Joyce gives this confused look as to how Jim is the one letting her out of this right now. And they're walking down the hall and she starts saying, I'm confused, what's going on? And Jim tries to just stop her right away. He basically says, we made an agreement, okay? So there was an agreement made that we do not know anything about, a verbal agreement that we did not see. And I say that we did not see this because I don't think that when Jim said, oh, I want you to give me your word, I don't think that that was the full-on agreement. There had to be something more as to why they're allowing Jim Hopper and Joyce to just go into the Upside Down to try and find Will. There had to be something more that was said during that agreement that we did not see, because all of a sudden Brenner is just letting them do this. They're letting them go into the Upside Down to go and find Will while they leave to go and try and find 11. So no doubt in my mind, something else was said that we never saw. So hopefully we see that in season 5. I think we're going to, because I really think that that's extremely fucking important, people. But the main thing is all of a sudden he just tells Joyce, he goes, we made an agreement. He goes, do you want Will back? And he says something very interesting, and this is proof to me that Hopper knows more once again, because he goes, everything that's happened here and that everything that's going to happen, we do not talk about. And Hopper is showing the signs that he is the one that does not want the public knowing about this. He's the one telling the people at Hawkins' lab, we cannot speak about this to anybody. He's the one that's telling Joyce right now that we cannot talk about what has happened and what is going to happen, which is very interesting because how the fuck does he know what's going to happen, right? And then this is actually when he says the line, what, do you want Will back? Because Hawkins' lab had nothing to do with it then. And that's very interesting because we know Hawkins' lab, like I said, as the ones who know how to cover all of this shit up, but we don't know why they are. We just know that they don't want to be caught with all this involvement, but is there a bigger reason to why they cannot let the public know this shit? And if you really think about it, our group being the boys and the fucking group that we have in this show, they're the ones who involve themselves with everything that's happening. They have involvement with 11 and all of this, but they're the ones involving themselves with the bigger problem. They have been involving themselves since the start, since Will got pulled into this, and that they found it necessary to involve themselves because it's their friend that went missing. So if they were never supposed to be involved, okay, we see hints of that very early on, like I said, in the very beginning of this show, involving Hopper and him telling them to just go home and to not be involved and to let them handle this, okay? But more importantly, that scene ends with Hopper and Joyce, all right, and they're walking down and he basically tells her that's the deal, all right? And he looks straight at the camera and it closes in on him, his mysterious ass face, and then all of a sudden those intro credits hit, okay? So no doubt in my mind, there's a reason why all of this is put into the intro at the very end of this first season, okay? And this, no doubt in my mind, has answers as to why Hopper knows more, and we get some answers and some hints to this, but we do not know the bigger picture, and we still do not know this. But like I said in part 2 of this theory, we're going to talk about a conversation, and we're going to jump all the way to season 4, okay? And we're going to talk about that conversation between Hopper and Dimitri when they're in the jail cell after Joyce and Murray have been caught, okay? This is after Hopper broke out, and now he's put back in with the guard, okay? So they have that whole conversation and shit. We're going to talk about that, and it gets very interesting because there's something that Hopper says that did not happen in this show. Something specifically about a monster in the show that we saw back in season 1 that's involved in season 4 only in Russia. So let me know your thoughts about this one, people. Let me know your thoughts about all of this, and let me know your questions. But more importantly, this is just my thoughts about all of this, okay? This is my thoughts because I've always had this thought about Hopper being involved with more, and this is the conversation that sprung my attention all the way back in season 1. So if we're onto this, and we got some of those hints and all of those other theories that Hopper could be the one involved with time, involved with memory, involved with the bigger picture, and we do not know why. But this conversation at the very end of season 1, no doubt in my mind, has hints, and no doubt in my mind has a lot of questions as to what Hopper said to them that made them just listen to him. So let me know your thoughts, people. I hope you guys liked this one. This was the beginning of the Jim Hopper theory. So keep subscribing, liking, following this journey, and you guys already motherfucking know we out.